The morning fog was thick that day, rolling in from the ocean like a gray blanket. Daniel stood at the edge of the cliff, looking down at the rocky beach below. He did this every morning before the sun came up. It was part of his job as the lighthouse keeper, making sure no boats had crashed during the night, checking if anyone needed help. He'd been doing this for 3 years now, ever since his world fell apart. Back then, he was someone different. He had a good job in the city, a wife he loved, and a little girl who made him smile every single day. Then cancer took his wife away, and suddenly he was alone with a 7-year-old daughter who kept asking when mommy was coming home. The city felt too loud after that, too many memories on every corner, so he took this job at the lighthouse in Cedar Cove, a small town where nobody knew his story. His daughter Lily was 8 now, probably still asleep in their small cottage next to the lighthouse. Mrs. Patterson from next door would check on her soon, like she did every morning. Daniel started walking down the narrow path to the beach, his boots crunching on the gravel. The tide was going out, leaving behind seaweed and driftwood. He'd found all sorts of things on this beach over the years. Fishing nets, pieces of boats, once even a message in a bottle from some kid's school project. But he'd never found people before. At first, he thought they were just dark rocks. The morning light was still weak, and his eyes weren't what they used to be. But as he got closer, his heart started pounding. There were 2 bodies lying on the sand near a pile of broken wood and white fiberglass. Pieces of what looked like an expensive boat. Daniel ran. His knees weren't great anymore, but he ran anyway. When he reached them, he dropped down in the sand. A woman and a small boy, both soaking wet, their lips looking blue in the dim light. The woman was maybe in her early 30s, wearing clothes that even Daniel could tell cost more than his monthly salary. Her dark hair was tangled with seaweed. The boy looked about 6, dressed in a little polo shirt that probably came from some fancy store. He had his mother's face, same nose and chin. Daniel pressed his fingers against the woman's neck, searching for a pulse. There it was, weak but steady. The boy, too. Both alive. Thank God, both alive. His hands were shaking as he pulled out his phone and called for help. The nearest hospital was in Millbrook, 45 minutes away. The dispatcher told him to keep them warm, monitor their breathing, and wait for the ambulance. Wait. That's all he could do. Daniel looked around at the debris scattered on the beach. This wasn't some old fishing boat. The pieces were sleek and modern. There was a leather cushion with gold stitching, a piece of polished wood with an engraved nameplate he couldn't quite read. He took off his thick jacket and wrapped it around the boy first. Kids got cold faster. Then he carefully lifted the woman's head onto his folded sweatshirt. Her skin was like ice. "Hey," he said softly, patting her cheek. "Can you hear me? Help is coming. You're going to be okay." Nothing. She didn't move. The boy made a small sound, and Daniel's attention snapped to him. The kid's eyes fluttered open for just a second. Blue eyes filled with confusion and fear. "It's okay, buddy," Daniel said, trying to sound calm even though his heart was racing. "You're safe now. I'm going to take care of you." The boy's eyes closed again. Daniel had been a father long enough to know that kids could feel your fear, even when they were barely conscious. He kept talking, keeping his voice steady and warm. He told them about the lighthouse, about how the sun would be up soon, about his daughter Lily, who loved to collect seashells on this very beach. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. Daniel kept checking their pulses, kept watching their chests rise and fall. The woman was shivering now, which was actually good. It meant her body was trying to warm itself up. Then her eyes opened. She looked right at Daniel, and for a moment she seemed confused about where she was. Then panic flooded her face. She tried to sit up, gasping. "My son," she choked out. "Where's my son?" "Right here," Daniel said quickly, pointing to the boy beside her. "He's breathing. He's okay. Just stay still, okay? Help is coming." But she wasn't listening. She was reaching for the boy with trembling hands, pulling him close, checking him over like mothers do. Her fingers touched his face, his arms, making sure he was real and whole. "We can't be found," she whispered. And Daniel wasn't sure if she was talking to him or to herself. "He'll find us." "He can't find us. Who?" Daniel asked. "Who's looking for you?" She looked at him, then really looked at him. Her eyes were dark brown, almost black, and they were filled with something Daniel recognized. Fear, the deep kind that doesn't go away. "Please," she said, gripping his arm with surprising strength. "Don't tell anyone who we are. Promise me." Protect him. Before Daniel could answer, before he could ask what she meant, her eyes rolled back and she went limp again. Her hand slipped from his arm, but not before he felt something cold against his skin. A bracelet, made of platinum with small diamonds catching the morning light. It fell onto the sand between them. Daniel heard sirens in the distance. The ambulance was coming up the coastal road. He should have felt relieved, but instead he felt uneasy. Something wasn't right about this whole situation. People didn't just fall off expensive boats. And they definitely didn't beg strangers not to reveal who they were. The paramedics arrived with a stretcher and equipment. They were good at their job, efficient and calm. They asked Daniel questions while they worked. When did he find them? Were they conscious? Any visible injuries? He answered everything honestly except for one thing. When they asked if the woman said anything, Daniel hesitated. Those words kept echoing in his head. Don't tell anyone. Protect him. She was confused, he finally said. Didn't make much sense. It wasn't exactly a lie. They loaded the woman and boy onto stretchers, wrapping them in thermal blankets. One of the paramedics, a young guy with red hair, whistled low as he looked at the woman's jewelry. These folks aren't from around here, he said. Look at that watch. That's a Patek Philippe. My brother's a jeweler, showed me one once. Cost more than my house. The other paramedic, an older woman, gave him a sharp look. Doesn't matter how much money they have if they're dead. Let's move. Daniel watched them carry the stretchers up the path to the waiting ambulance. The boy's small hand hung over the side, so pale it looked almost transparent in the growing daylight. Sir? The female paramedic called back to him. You coming to the hospital? They'll want a statement. Yeah, Daniel said. I'll follow in my truck. But as the ambulance drove away, sirens wailing, Daniel stood there on the beach holding that platinum bracelet. The sun was coming up now, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. It should have been beautiful, but all he could think about was the terror in that woman's eyes. He can't find us. Who was she running from? And what had he just gotten himself involved in? Daniel slipped the bracelet into his pocket and started walking back to the lighthouse. He needed to check on Lily, needed to tell Mrs. Patterson what had happened, and then he needed to go to that hospital and find out who these people were, even though something told him that knowing the truth might be the most dangerous thing he'd ever do. The hospital smelled like disinfectant and old coffee. Daniel had always hated hospitals, ever since the months he spent watching his wife fade away in one. But here he was again, sitting in an uncomfortable plastic chair in the emergency room waiting area. Lily was with him this time. She sat beside him with her backpack full of coloring books, swinging her legs back and forth. Mrs. Patterson had offered to keep her, but Daniel didn't want to leave his daughter alone. Not when he didn't know what he was walking into. Daddy, are the people okay? Lily asked for the third time. I hope so, sweetheart, Daniel said, squeezing her hand. A nurse finally called him over to the desk. She was middle-aged with tired eyes and a kind smile. You're the man who found them? She asked. Yes, ma'am. They're stable. Hypothermia, some bruising, but they'll recover. The woman's been asking for you. That surprised him. She's awake? Just woke up about 20 minutes ago. Wouldn't give us any information until she spoke to you first. The nurse lowered her voice. Between you and me, she's terrified of something. Won't even let us call her family. Daniel felt that uneasiness grow stronger. Can I see her? Room 237, but sir? The nurse gave him a meaningful look. That woman in there is wearing a $10,000 dress. And I recognized her face from the news. That's Victoria Ashford. The name hit Daniel like a punch. He'd heard of her, of course. Who hadn't? Victoria Ashford, the tech billionaire who built her company from nothing. She was always in the business news. Young, brilliant, and worth more money than Daniel could imagine. Are you sure? He asked. Positive. My daughter's an engineer. Follows her career like some people follow movie stars. That's definitely her. The nurse glanced around. The question is, what's a billionaire doing washing up on our beach? Daniel didn't have an answer for that. He left Lily with the nurse, who promised to keep an eye on her, and walked down the hallway to room 237. His hand hesitated on the door handle. Everything in his gut told him that opening this door would change his life. He opened it anyway. Victoria Ashford was sitting up in the hospital bed, looking small despite her obvious strength. Her dark hair was clean now, pulled back in a simple ponytail. Without makeup and fancy clothes, she looked younger and scared. The boy, her son, was asleep in the bed next to hers. Someone had dressed him in a hospital gown that was too big for him. You came. Victoria said, relief flooding her face. You asked me to. Thank you. For everything. For saving us. Her voice cracked a little. The doctor said if you hadn't found us when you did. Daniel pulled up a chair and sat down. What happened out there? That boat didn't just sink on its own. Victoria looked at her sleeping son for a long moment. Then she started talking. I was running, she said simply, from my ex-husband. His name is Richard Ashford. We divorced 2 years ago, but he's been fighting me for custody of Oliver ever since. She gestured to the boy. Not because he loves him. Because he wants to control me. I don't understand. Richard is powerful, connected. He has lawyers and money and friends in high places. He's been making my life impossible. Using the legal system to drag me through court over and over. Last week I found out he was planning something. Going to have me declared an unfit mother. He has a judge in his pocket ready to give him full custody. Daniel frowned. Can he do that? Just by a judge? You'd be surprised what money can buy. Victoria's laugh was bitter. I panicked. I took Oliver and ran. I chartered a yacht, thought we could disappear for a while until I figured out what to do. But Richard has people watching me. They found us. What do you mean, found you? We were 2 hours out when another boat came up fast. I recognized one of Richard's security team. They wanted to board us, said Richard was worried about Oliver's safety. But I knew if they took us back. She closed her eyes. So I told the captain to go faster. There was a storm rolling in. It was stupid, I know, dangerous, but I was desperate. The boat hit something in the water, a log maybe, something big. We started taking on water fast. The captain told us to put on life jackets and get into the emergency raft. But the waves were so high, Oliver and I got separated from everyone else. I just held on to him and prayed. Her hands were shaking now. Daniel could see marks on her wrist that looked like old bruises faded to yellow-green. Did he hurt you? Daniel asked quietly. Victoria pulled her sleeves down quickly. Richard never hit me. He didn't have to. He controlled everything else. What I wore, who I talked to, where I went. And if I didn't do what he wanted, he'd fly into these rages. Breaking things, screaming. He made me feel like I was crazy, like I was the problem. She looked up at Daniel. You probably think I'm paranoid. Rich woman with too many problems. No, Daniel said. I think you're a mother trying to protect her son. Something in Victoria's expression softened. The nurse told me you're a single father too. That you have a daughter, Lily. She's 8. Her mother passed away 3 years ago. I'm sorry. They sat in silence for a moment. Outside the window, Daniel could see the sun climbing higher in the sky. In a few hours, this story would probably be all over the news. Billionaire missing at sea. He wondered how long they had before Richard found them. What are you going to do? He asked. I don't know. Victoria looked lost. I can't go back to the city. Richard will be watching my house, my office, everywhere. Hotels, family, friends, he has eyes everywhere. If I call anyone for help, he'll know. What about the police? And tell them what? That my ex-husband is mean to me? That I'm afraid of him? There's no proof of abuse, no police reports. I never filed anything because I was ashamed. Stupid, right? A woman who runs a billion-dollar company, too scared to file a police report. Daniel understood that kind of shame. After his wife died, people expected him to be strong, to have it all together. They didn't understand the nights he cried in the shower, or the times he couldn't get out of bed because the grief was too heavy. Where's the rest of your crew? He asked. The captain and everyone else on the boat? I don't know. I hope they made it. But they'll talk. They'll tell the authorities who we are. By tonight, Richard will know we survived. He'll come looking. Then you need a place to hide. Victoria laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. Hide where? I'm one of the most recognizable women in tech. My face has been on magazine covers. I can't exactly check into a motel. Daniel knew what he was about to say was crazy, absolutely insane. But he said it anyway. You could stay with me. Victoria stared at him. What? Just temporarily. A few days, maybe a week, until you figure out what to do. I live in the lighthouse keeper's cottage in Cedar Cove. It's small and not fancy, but it's quiet. Nobody would think to look for you there. I can't ask you to do that. You're not asking. I'm offering. You don't even know me. I know you're terrified. I know you'd rather risk drowning than let your son get taken from you. That's enough. Victoria looked at Oliver, still sleeping peacefully. What about your daughter? This could be dangerous for her, too. Daniel had thought about that. But he'd also thought about what would happen if he did nothing. If he left this woman and child to face whatever was coming alone, Lily and I will be fine, he said. The question is, will you be? Before Victoria could answer, there was a knock at the door. A doctor came in with a clipboard and a professional smile. Ms. Ashford, we need to discuss your discharge papers and contact your family. Victoria's face went pale. How did you know my name? Your photo has been all over the news for the past hour. Missing at sea, possible yacht accident. Your ex-husband is offering a reward for information about your whereabouts. $500,000. Daniel saw Victoria's hands grip the bedsheet so hard her knuckles turned white. I need to make a phone call, the doctor continued. Hospital policy requires us to notify family in cases like this. No, Victoria said quickly. Please, not yet. The doctor looked uncomfortable. Ma'am, I understand you've been through trauma, but your family is worried. My family is the reason I'm in this hospital, Victoria said, her voice sharp now. If you call Richard Ashford, you're putting my son in danger. The doctor clearly didn't believe her. Daniel could see it in his face. He probably thought she was confused from the hypothermia, maybe even mentally unstable like Richard apparently claimed. I'll give you some time to rest, the doctor said carefully, but we will need to make some calls before we discharge you. After he left, Victoria looked at Daniel with desperate eyes. We need to leave now before he calls. Richard, you're in no condition to go anywhere. I don't have a choice. She was already pulling the IV out of her arm, wincing as she did it. Once Richard knows we're here, he'll have people here in hours. Maybe less. Please, Daniel. I need your help. Daniel looked at this woman, this stranger who somehow didn't feel like a stranger anymore. Then he looked at the little boy in the next bed, so small and vulnerable. He thought about Lily, about the life he'd built in Cedar Cove, quiet and safe and predictable. He thought about how one decision could change everything. Okay, he said, but we do this my way, quietly, no drama. Relief washed over Victoria's face. Thank you. I'll pay you whatever you need. I don't want your money. I want you to trust me, she nodded slowly. I do. I don't know why, but I do. Daniel went to wake Oliver while Victoria got dressed in clothes a nurse had given her. Simple jeu. The lighthouse cottage was never meant to hold 4 people. It had 2 small bedrooms, a kitchen barely big enough to turn around in, and a living room with a couch that had seen better days. But Victoria looked at it like it was a palace. It's perfect, she said, and Daniel could tell she meant it. That first night was awkward. Victoria and Oliver took Daniel's bedroom while he slept on the couch. Lily kept peeking around corners at their guests, curious about the woman and boy who'd appeared in their lives so suddenly. Oliver barely spoke, clinging to his mother like she might disappear if he let go. Daniel made spaghetti for dinner. It was one of the 3 things he could cook without burning. Victoria sat at the small kitchen table and watched him like she'd never seen anyone cook before. Don't you have people who do this for you? Lily asked innocently. Cookin' stuff? Lily, Daniel warned gently, but Victoria smiled. I do actually, or I did. I haven't made a meal for myself in probably 5 years. She looked embarrassed. That sounds terrible, doesn't it? It sounds lonely, Daniel said. Something passed between them, an understanding. They were both lonely people trying to raise kids on their own. The only difference was the size of their bank accounts. The days started to blend together. Daniel went about his lighthouse duties while Victoria stayed inside, using a laptop she'd somehow managed to hold on to through everything. She worked remotely, handling her company's business through encrypted connections and burner phones that she bought from a shop 2 towns over. I'm still the CEO, she explained to Daniel one evening. I can't just disappear completely. But as far as anyone knows, I'm on a private retreat dealing with the trauma of the accident. My assistant is the only one who knows how to reach me, and she's loyal. Can you trust her? With my life. She's been with me since the beginning. Lily and Oliver became friends faster than Daniel expected. At first, Oliver was too quiet, too withdrawn. But Lily had a way of drawing people out. She shared her coloring books, showed him the best shells on the beach, taught him how to skip stones in the shallow pools. One afternoon, Daniel found them both in Lily's room. Oliver was laughing, actually laughing. It was the first time Daniel had heard him make that sound. What's so funny? Daniel asked from the doorway. Oliver never saw a hermit crab before, Lily said, grinning. He thought it was a regular crab that lived in someone's house. Oliver's cheeks turned red, but he was still smiling. We don't have beaches in the city. Just buildings. Daniel sat down on the floor with them. What else don't you have in the city? Oliver thought about it. Stars, you can't really see them because of all the lights. And it's never quiet. Always cars and sirens and people. Do you like it here better? Lily asked. Oliver looked uncertain, like he was afraid of giving the wrong answer. Is it okay if I do? Of course it's okay, Daniel said. This is your home now. For as long as you need it to be. Later that night, after both kids were asleep, Victoria found Daniel on the porch. He was drinking coffee and watching the lighthouse beam sweep across the dark water. Thank you, she said, sitting down beside him, for what you said to Oliver. About this being his home, I meant it. I know you did. That's what makes it mean something. She wrapped her arms around herself against the cool night air. He's different here, lighter. In the city, he was always so anxious, always worried about making his father angry, about saying the wrong thing. Kids shouldn't have to live like that. No, they shouldn't. Victoria was quiet for a moment. I failed him, you know. For years I told myself I was staying with Richard for Oliver's sake, that kids need two parents. But the truth is I was just scared. Scared of being alone. Scared of what Richard might do if I left. You left eventually. Only because it got so bad I didn't have a choice. And even then I didn't really leave. I just filed for divorce. I still let Richard control so much of our lives because I was afraid of the custody battle. She looked at Daniel. Do you think that makes me a coward? Daniel remembered the nights after his wife died, when he was so paralyzed by grief he couldn't function. When Mrs. Patterson had to come over and make sure Lily ate breakfast because he couldn't get out of bed. I think it makes you human, he said. They talked late into the night, sharing stories. Victoria told him about growing up poor, about building her company in a garage with nothing but a laptop and an idea. About the first time she saw Richard at a tech conference and thought he was charming instead of controlling. Daniel told her about meeting his wife in college, about their plans to travel the world together, about how cancer took her so fast they didn't even get to say proper goodbyes. I'm sorry, Victoria said. That's not fair. Life isn't fair. We just do the best we can with what we're given. Is that what you're doing with us? Your best? Daniel looked at her. Really looked at her. In the dim porch light, she wasn't a billionaire or a CEO. She was just a woman who'd been through something terrible and was trying to protect her child. Just like him, yeah, he said. I guess it is. 2 weeks passed. Then 3. Cedar Cove was a small town where everybody knew everybody, and people started noticing Daniel's guests. Mrs. Patterson was the first to ask questions. Who's the woman staying with you? She asked one morning when she came by to drop off some homemade cookies. A friend, Daniel said carefully. She needed a place to stay for a while. Mrs. Patterson gave him a knowing look. Must be some friend. She drives Oliver to the library in your truck wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses like she's hiding from someone. She values her privacy. Mm-hmm. Mrs. Patterson didn't look convinced, but she didn't push. Well, tell your private friend that if she needs anything, I'm right next door. And Daniel? Be careful. A woman who's hiding is usually hiding from something dangerous. It was good advice. Daniel knew that. But knowing something and doing something about it were two different things. The danger came to Cedar Cove on a Tuesday afternoon. Daniel was in town getting groceries when he saw them. 2 men in dark suits standing outside the general store and showing people a photo on their phones. Even from a distance, Daniel could tell they weren't locals. They moved wrong, looked wrong. Too sharp, too alert. He casually walked closer, pretending to check his phone. One of the men was talking to Mr. Henderson, who owned the hardware store. We're looking for this woman and child, the man said, holding up his phone. They may be in the area. There's a substantial reward for information. Daniel's blood ran cold. On the phone screen was a photo of Victoria and Oliver. Never seen them, Mr. Henderson said, barely glancing at the photo. We don't get many tourists here this time of year. The man didn't look like he believed him, but he moved on to the next person. Daniel watched him work his way through town, showing that photo to everyone. Most people shook their heads and moved on. But Daniel saw Mrs. Chen, who ran the bookshop, pull out her phone after the men left. She was making a call. Daniel's hand shook as he loaded groceries into his truck. He needed to warn Victoria, but he also needed to act normal, not draw attention. He drove home at exactly the speed limit, checking his mirror constantly for cars following him. When he got home, Victoria was teaching both kids math at the kitchen table. She'd been doing that, filling in gaps in Oliver's education. The kid was smart, way ahead in some subjects and behind in others. Lily loved the extra lessons, loved having someone who could explain things in ways that made sense. "We have a problem," Daniel said quietly. Victoria looked up and immediately understood. "They're here, in town, showing your photo around." The color drained from her face. "We need to leave." "Leave and go where?" "If they found you here, they can find you anywhere." "Then what do we do?" Daniel thought about Mr. Henderson, about how he'd lied to those men without hesitation, about Mrs. Patterson's warning, about this town that had taken him in when he was broken and never asked him to be anything other than himself. "We trust Cedar Cove," he said. That evening, Daniel made some calls, first to Mrs. Patterson, then to Mr. Henderson, then to Mrs. Chen. He told them the truth, not all of it, but enough, that Victoria was running from an abusive ex-husband, that the men in town worked for him, that she and Oliver needed protection. "How long?" Mrs. Patterson asked. "I don't know, until we figure something else out. Then we'll buy you time." Word spread through Cedar Cove the way it always did in small towns. By nightfall, everyone knew, and everyone made a choice. They chose to protect their own. When Richard's men came back the next day, they hit a wall of silence. Nobody had seen anything. Nobody knew anything. The reward money didn't matter. In Cedar Cove, you looked after your neighbors, but Daniel knew it was only a matter of time. Richard was rich and determined. He'd send more people, offer more money. Eventually someone would talk. "We can't run forever," Victoria said that night. They were on the porch again, their usual spot. "Richard will never stop looking." "Then maybe it's time to stop running and start fighting." "With what?" "He has lawyers and judges and money." "I have nothing. You have the truth, and you have people who believe you." Victoria shook her head. "You don't understand how these things work. In family court, it's not about truth. It's about what you can prove. And I can't prove anything. Then we find proof. Daniel, you're a lighthouse keeper. No offense, but you can't fight a billionaire." "Maybe not." James arrived in Cedar Cove on a Thursday morning, driving a beat-up Honda that looked nothing like a lawyer's car. He was tall and thin, with graying hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. When he shook Daniel's hand, his grip was firm. "You look old, Danny," he said with a grin. "You look like you sleep in your car." "Sometimes I do." James turned to Victoria. "You must be the famous runaway billionaire." Victoria flinched at the word, but James's tone wasn't judgmental. "Just matter of fact. I prefer survivor," she said. "Fair enough. Let's see what we're working with." They set up in the Lighthouse Cottage's tiny living room. Victoria pulled out her laptop and started accessing the encrypted files she'd hidden before running. James watched the screen intently, his expression getting darker with each document that appeared. "Jesus," he muttered. "This guy's dirty." "Really dirty. What do you see?" Daniel asked. "Shell companies. Offshore accounts. Payments to people who definitely shouldn't be receiving payments." James pointed at the screen. "This here? That's a wire transfer to a county judge. Not a small one either. $50,000. Victoria's face went pale. "That's Judge Morrison. He's been assigned to our custody case." "Not anymore, he isn't. This is evidence of bribery. We can get him removed, probably disbarred." James kept scrolling. "There's more, lots more. Tax evasion, fraud, possibly money laundering. Your ex-husband isn't just a controlling jerk. He's a criminal." "Can we use this?" Victoria asked. "To protect Oliver? We can use it to put Richard Ashford in prison," James said. "But there's a catch. The moment we show this to anyone, he'll know. And desperate men do desperate things." Daniel didn't like the sound of that. "What kind of desperate things?" "The kind that puts you all in danger. If Richard thinks these files are going public, he might try to silence the witnesses. Or grab the kid and run. We need to be smart about how we handle this." They spent the next 3 days building a strategy. James would take the evidence to the FBI, not local authorities. Federal crimes meant federal jurisdiction, away from Richard's local connections. But they needed to time it right. Move too fast and Richard would vanish before they could arrest him. Too slow and he might find Victoria first. "We also need to deal with the custody case," James said. "Even with this evidence, courts move slow. We need to get an emergency protective order, show that Oliver's in danger if he goes back to his father." "How do we prove that?" Victoria asked. "Oliver's testimony, a child psychologist's evaluation, and documentation of Richard's behavior." James looked at Daniel. Any chance those men who came through town caused trouble? Made threats? They asked questions. Nothing illegal. Damn, we need something concrete. Something that shows Richard as a threat. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about Oliver's nightmares, about the fear in that little boy's eyes, about Victoria's bruises and the way she still flinched when someone moved too fast. He was making coffee at dawn when his phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Is this Daniel Hayes? A man's voice. Smooth and confident. Who's asking? My name is Richard Ashford. I believe you have something that belongs to me. Daniel's blood turned cold. He walked outside so Victoria wouldn't hear. I don't know what you're talking about. Please. Don't insult my intelligence. I know my ex-wife and son are staying with you. I know you pulled them out of the hospital and have been hiding them for weeks. I also know you're working with a lawyer now. James Chen, correct? Coast Guard buddy of yours? Daniel's mind raced. How did Richard know all this? Who'd talked? What do you want? I want my son back. Victoria can do whatever she wants, but Oliver comes home with me. That's not negotiable. The kid's terrified of you. The kid has been poisoned against me by his mother. She's unstable, Mr. Hayes. Paranoid. Surely you've noticed the irrational behavior, the wild accusations. I'm trying to help her, but she needs professional treatment. And Oliver needs stability. You mean he needs a father who doesn't bribe judges and threaten witnesses? There was a pause. When Richard spoke again, his voice had lost its smoothness. I see Victoria's been telling stories. Here's the truth, Mr. Hayes. I have resources you can't imagine. Lawyers who will destroy you in court. Private investigators who will dig up every mistake you've ever made. How long do you think you'll keep custody of your own daughter when they find out you're harboring a fugitive and involving children in a criminal matter? Are you threatening me? I'm stating facts. You're in over your head. Victoria is using you just like she uses everyone. When this is over, she'll go back to her mansions and private jets and you'll be left dealing with the consequences. Richard's voice softened, became almost kind. I don't want to hurt you. Just give me my son. Walk away from this mess while you still can. Daniel thought about Lily, about the life they'd built here, about how one phone call to social services could turn their world upside down. I'll think about it, he lied. You have 24 hours. After that, things get complicated. The line went dead. Daniel stood on the porch watching the sun rise over the ocean. His hands were shaking. Richard was right about one thing. Daniel was in over his head. But he was wrong about everything else. When he went back inside, Victoria was awake making breakfast. She took one look at his face and knew. He called you, didn't he? Daniel nodded and told her everything. Victoria sat down heavily at the kitchen table. He threatened Lily. Of course he did. That's what he does. He finds what you love and uses it against you. What do we do? Before Victoria could answer, James came down from the spare room where he'd been sleeping. We move faster than he expects. The FBI agent I contacted agreed to meet today. If we can get these files into federal hands by tonight, Richard can't stop what's coming. But he'll know, Victoria said. The moment we make that move, he'll know. And he'll come after Oliver. Which is why Oliver and Lily can't be here when we do it. James pulled out his phone. I have a friend who runs a safe house for domestic violence survivors. 2 hours north. High security, no connections to Richard. We send the kids there with someone we trust, then we trigger the investigation. Daniel looked at Victoria. What do you think? I think I'm tired of running. I think Oliver deserves better than spending his life afraid. She straightened her shoulders. Let's do it. Mrs. Patterson agreed to take the kids to the safe house. She'd been a social worker before retiring, knew how these situations worked. She also had a nephew who was a state trooper, someone who could provide extra protection if needed. You're sure about this? Daniel asked her as they loaded both kids into her car. Honey, I've been dealing with men like Richard Ashford my whole career, bullies with money who think they can buy anything, including children. She patted his cheek. You're doing the right thing. Lily was scared. Daniel could see it in her eyes as he hugged her goodbye. Why can't I stay with you, Daddy? Because I need to know you're safe, sweetheart. Mrs. Patterson is going to take you somewhere fun. Like an adventure. I don't want an adventure. I want to stay home. Oliver was clutching his mother, crying silently. Victoria knelt down to his level. Baby, I need you to be brave for me. Can you do that? Just for a little while? You're coming back, right? Oliver asked. You're not leaving me like Daddy said you would? Victoria's face crumpled. Your father said that? Oliver nodded. He said you'd get tired of me and leave. That nobody really wants me. That is not true. Victoria pulled him close, fierce. I will always want you, always, and I'm coming back. I promise. But right now I need you safe while I make sure the bad man can't hurt us anymore. You promise? I promise. Daniel watched Mrs. Patterson's car disappear down the coastal road. The cottage felt empty without the kids. Too quiet. Now what? Victoria asked. Now we give the FBI everything, James said. And then we prepare for war. The FBI agent's name was Michelle Torres, and she didn't look impressed when they first met at a coffee shop in the next town over. She looked even less impressed when James started explaining the situation. Let me get this straight, she said. You want me to investigate a prominent businessman based on files stolen by his ex-wife? Not stolen, James corrected. These were joint accounts during their marriage. Victoria had legal access, that's debatable, and even if I wanted to pursue this, it could take months, maybe years. Victoria leaned forward. Those files show Richard Ashford bribing a family court judge. They show connections to organized crime. They show him using his company to launder money. How many months do you need to see that this man is dangerous? Agent Torres studied Victoria for a long moment. You're asking me to go after someone powerful, someone with connections. I need to know you're committed to seeing this through. No backing out when things get hard. I've been through hard, Victoria said quietly. This is survival. Something in her tone must have convinced Agent Torres. She took the USB drive with the files and promised to review them immediately. If what you're saying is true, we'll move fast, she said. But Ms. Ashford, you need to understand something. The moment we start making arrests, Richard will know who gave us this information. Your life is going to get very complicated. My life is already complicated. They drove back to Cedar Cove in silence. Daniel kept checking the mirrors, paranoid that Richard's people were following them. Every car looked suspicious. Ever. 6 months had passed since that night with the police cars and sirens. 6 months since Richard Ashford was arrested, and Victoria's life stopped being a constant state of panic. The world felt different now. Quieter. Safer. The custody hearing happened on a Tuesday morning in late spring. Victoria wore a simple blue dress and minimal jewelry. Nothing flashy. Nothing that screamed billionaire. Just a mother fighting for her son. The courtroom was smaller than she expected. Wood paneling on the walls, fluorescent lights overhead, rows of benches that reminded her of church pews. Richard sat at the other table with his lawyers. 3 of them, all in expensive suits. He wouldn't look at her. He'd changed in 6 months. Lost weight. Got gray in his hair that wasn't there before. Prison did that to people, Victoria supposed. Even minimum security white-collar prison. Daniel sat behind Victoria in the gallery right next to James. He'd wanted to testify, to tell the judge everything he'd witnessed. But James said it was better to let the evidence speak for itself. Let the professionals do their job. Oliver was in a private room with a child psychologist. The judge would talk to him separately, away from both parents. It was standard procedure in custody cases, but that didn't make it easier. Victoria kept imagining her son scared and alone, answering questions about his father. The hearing lasted 3 days. Witnesses testified. Richard's former business partners talked about his temper, his need for control. Victoria's assistant described the bruises she'd seen. The times Victoria came to work clearly shaken. A financial expert explained the bribery charges, the illegal payments, the corruption. Richard's lawyers tried to paint Victoria as unstable. They brought up the yacht incident, implied she was reckless with Oliver's safety. They tried to make her running look like kidnapping instead of escape, but then Oliver's therapist testified. She'd been working with him for 4 months, helping him process his trauma. She spoke calmly and professionally about Oliver's fear of his father, about the anxiety that had been plaguing him for years, about how much better he'd gotten since being away from Richard's influence. In my professional opinion, she said, placing this child back in his father's custody would be detrimental to his mental health and emotional well-being. Richard's face went red. He leaned over to whisper something harsh to his lawyers. The turning point came on the 3rd day. Oliver had to speak to the judge in chambers. Victoria wasn't allowed in the room, but she waited outside with Daniel, pacing the hallway. He's going to be okay, Daniel kept saying. He's a strong kid. He shouldn't have to be strong. He's 7 years old. When Oliver finally came out, he ran straight to Victoria and buried his face in her stomach. The judge came out a moment later, her expression unreadable. Back in the courtroom, the judge cleared her throat. "I've reviewed all the evidence presented," she began. "I've spoken with the child at length, and I've considered the testimony of multiple experts. This court finds that Richard Ashford engaged in a pattern of emotional abuse and manipulation. Furthermore, his current legal troubles demonstrate a serious lack of judgment and moral character." Richard started to stand, but his lawyer pulled him back down. "Therefore," the judge continued, "full custody of Oliver Ashford is granted to his mother, Victoria Ashford. The father's visitation rights are suspended pending completion of court-mandated therapy and anger management programs. After a minimum of 1 year, we can revisit supervised visitation. But that will depend on Mr. Ashford demonstrating significant behavioral change." Victoria couldn't breathe. She heard the words, but they didn't feel real. "Additionally," the judge said, looking directly at Richard, "I want to make something clear. Your wealth and connections mean nothing in this courtroom. You used your power to intimidate and control. You bribed officials and broke the law. Those actions have consequences. If you make any attempt to contact Ms. Ashford or Oliver outside of court-approved channels, you will be held in contempt. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Honor," Richard said, his voice barely audible. The gavel came down. It was over. In the hallway outside, Victoria collapsed into Daniel's arms. She wasn't crying. She was laughing. The kind of laugh that comes from pure relief from realizing you can finally breathe again. "We won," she kept saying. "We actually won." Oliver hugged them both, grinning wider than Victoria had ever seen. "Does this mean we don't have to hide anymore?" "No more hiding, baby. We can go anywhere we want. Can we go back to the lighthouse?" Victoria looked at Daniel. "Is that offer still open?" "Always," he said. They drove back to Cedar Cove that afternoon. The town welcomed them like returning heroes. Mrs. Patterson had organized a small gathering at the lighthouse cottage. Nothing fancy, just neighbors bringing food and congratulations. Mr. Henderson brought fresh bread from his wife's bakery. Mrs. Chen came with books for Oliver, said every boy should have a good library. The sheriff stopped by to make sure they knew he was keeping an eye out, just in case Richard tried anything stupid. "You're one of us now," he told Victoria. "Cedar Cove takes care of its own." It was the first time Victoria felt like she belonged somewhere. Not because of her money or her company, just because people chose to care about her. Over the next few months, life settled into a new rhythm. Victoria decided to relocate part of her company's operations to a building near Cedar Cove. It created jobs, brought opportunities to the small town. But more importantly, it meant she could work and still be close to Oliver. She and Daniel took things slow. No rushing into anything. They'd have dinner together after the kids went to bed. Long walks on the beach. Conversations that lasted until sunrise. Lily and Oliver were inseparable now. They called each other best friends, but they acted more like siblings, arguing over toys one minute, defending each other the next. One Saturday, Victoria found them in the lighthouse. Oliver was showing Lily something on his tablet, some engineering program he'd discovered. "Look, if you adjust this angle, the light reaches farther," he was explaining. Lily studied the screen seriously. "Could we make the lighthouse beam stronger, so it helps more boats?" "Maybe. We'd need to upgrade the lens and the power source." Victoria smiled. Her son, the engineer in training. She'd been worried about him for so long, worried he'd be damaged by everything with Richard. But kids were resilient. With the right support, the right love, they could heal. Daniel found her standing there watching the kids. "Penny, for your thoughts," he said. "I was just thinking about how lucky I am. 6 months ago, I was drowning in the ocean, literally and figuratively. Now look at us. Pretty good turnaround. It's because of you. You saved us." Daniel shook his head. "You saved yourself. I just gave you a safe place to land. Is this still a safe place?" Victoria asked. "Or am I imposing on your life?" "Victoria Ashford, are you fishing for compliments?" She blushed. "Maybe." Daniel pulled her close. "You and Oliver can stay as long as you want. Forever, if that's what you're asking. Is that a proposal?" "Not yet. When I propose, you'll know. Trust me." The proposal came 3 months later, on the anniversary of the day Daniel found them on the beach. He took her to the exact spot at sunset, with both kids hiding behind rocks to watch. "I'm not good at fancy speeches," Daniel said, And I definitely can't compete with the kind of life you're used to. But I love you. I love Oliver. And if you'll have me, I'd like to spend the rest of my life making you happy. The ring was simple. Handmade from copper he'd salvaged from the lighthouse's old fixtures. It wasn't diamonds and platinum. It was just Daniel. Genuine and real. Yes, Victoria said, crying and laughing at the same time. Yes, absolutely, yes. Lily and Oliver came running out from their hiding spots, cheering and hugging everyone. They all ended up in a pile on the sand, laughing like fools. The wedding happened 2 months later. Small ceremony right there at the lighthouse. Mrs. Patterson officiated, having gotten ordained online specifically for the occasion. James was best man. Mrs. Chen brought flowers from her garden. Victoria wore a simple white dress she bought at a store in town, not some designer creation. Oliver and Lily were ring bearers, both taking the job very seriously. Do you, Victoria Ashford, take this man to be your husband? Mrs. Patterson asked. I do. And do you, Daniel Hayes, take this woman to be your wife? I do. Then by the power vested in me by the internet and the state, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Kiss already, you two, everyone cheered. It was nothing like Victoria's first wedding, with its 500 guests and ice sculptures and champagne fountains. This was better. This was real. After the ceremony, they had a barbecue on the beach. Someone brought a guitar. Mr. Henderson told terrible jokes that made Oliver laugh. The whole town showed up, it seemed like. As the sun set, Daniel and Victoria stood at the water's edge watching their kids play in the waves. Do you ever regret it? Daniel asked. Giving up the mansions and the private jets for this? Victoria looked at her son splashing in the water with Lily, happy and carefree and safe. She looked at the small cottage that was now her home, at the community that had embraced her without asking for anything in return. Not for a second, she said. This is what I was looking for my whole life. I just didn't know it until I washed up on your beach. Our beach now. Our beach, she agreed. That night, after everyone went home and the kids were asleep, Dee,